fights with passion, and he inspires.
Are you ready for a war?
All right, welcome back to From 8 Arbitration. Going to have a good episode today. I'm going to read for an hour on the 6-day count. So that's going to be entertaining as always. And we'll say goodbye. And so that's something that's been coming a long time. And so we're going to do that. And so I'm going to give a couple of shout outs first. Then we'll get into the goodbye. And then I'll read for an hour. And then next week I will do the training that I normally do when I go places, the saving minutes on the 6-day count. That's good training. And so we'll do that next Sunday, okay? But Mallory, I'm going to start it off every week, like I said, talking about Mallory, making sure that y'all are taking care of her because she takes care of us. Get on from 8arbitration.com and you will see the little, like I call the little tip jar for her, just to say thank you. I think it says buy me a coffee or something like that. But get on there, show her some love. She does a lot of work, not just with From 8 Arbitration, but the CCA Corner. A lot of stuff on a lot of different platforms she's involved with. I know Reddit and Discord she's involved with. So if y'all don't mind, get on there and show her a little love. You don't have to give her $1,000. She'd probably appreciate that. But like I say, just a little tip jar just to say thank you. All right. Now tomorrow, 9:00 Eastern PM. And this is what it is. Concerned Letter Carriers CLC Fundraiser Winners Live Drawing. Thanks to your amazing support, our March fundraiser was a success. Now it's time to find out who's getting some exclusive CLC gear. And we'll be shipping it straight to the winners' addresses. Join us live on Facebook. Tuesday, April 14th, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific. We'll be drawing the names live for everyone who donated by March 31st. $100 donations, a chance to win a CLC varsity jacket. $50 to $99 donations, chance to win a CLC hoodie. $25 to $49 donations, chance to win a CLC t-shirt. $1 to $24 donations, chance to win a CLC hat or a beanie. Don't miss it. Winners will be announced live, and we'll ship your prizes directly to your address. We're so grateful for your support in the fight for dignity, respect, and fair contracts for letter carriers. Spread the word, tag your friends, and tune in. Stay connected, Concerned Letter Carriers. Follow us on all our platforms for updates, resources, and more. www.concernedlettercarriers.com. So if you've contributed anything, make sure you are watching tomorrow night, Facebook Live. Go to Concerned Letter Carriers Facebook page, and they're going to be drawing names for those that have donated for a chance to win. All right, so that's pretty cool. They'll do that every month. And so make sure you're getting on concernedlettercarriers.com, following, supporting, endorsing, donating. All those things are important. We're going to take back over this union. That's a foregone conclusion. But it takes money. It takes money, unfortunately. We're doing a lot of this on our own dime. I know a lot of people traveling on their own dime. And so it gets a little pricey. But hey, when you're trying to change the culture of a union, the change the culture on the workroom floor, and go after management, it's going to cost on the front end a little bit. So anything you can do to help the Concerned Letter Carriers, fantastic. We appreciate every penny, all right? Some shout-outs. Make sure you're getting on Discord. If you don't know how, get on from 8arbitration.com. You'll see the link to Discord. Get on there. A lot of great stuff happening on Discord. You know how I feel about those people. They're crazy. But they do a lot of great union stuff. You'll see different channels on grievance help and grievance templates. A lot of current information on there. A lot of updates going on there. And they just have a good time with each other. They really do. They love each other on there. They're a family. So make sure you're getting on Discord. Make sure you're getting on Reddit. I think Reddit's up to about 8,000 members now. Now, Reddit's different. Reddit's different. It's got everybody involved with everything on there. It's got every party that's going at it on that thing. I take a lot of flack on Reddit, but I love it. I love it. Hey, if I'm going to put myself out there every week on this thing, dogging people, calling people out of their name, I can't have thin skin. So I got thick skin. And so it gets lively on there sometimes. But it's also some great stuff going on Reddit. A lot of great information. A lot of people get on there and ask questions, and immediately 3 or 4, 5, 10 people help them. Okay, so make sure you're getting on Reddit. CCA Corner. Make sure you're telling your CCAs to listen to CCA Corner, all right? That's critical. We need to get our CCAs involved. We need to let them know that there are those out there trying to help, and they have support. I know that that's one of the biggest things the CLC is going to do when we take over is make sure the CCA is priority one, okay? Because they've been abandoned by this current administration that's done nothing but lied to them this entire process. So CCA Corner, make sure you're telling your CCAs about that, all right? Let's get some of these shout outs. Got Corey, I want to give a shout out to Ben Jones in Mississippi. Brother, you're going to be a wrecking ball to management, and you'll get your office under control. I can hear it in your voice. Just wait until you get the chance to settle in as a steward. Last week, Corey, I had you shout out to my small office people, and brother, we helped one in need. Ben is from a single route office and is also his own branch, which means he is every position all in one with zero training. I reached out to his MBA to get them in touch with him, and so far it looks like he's on his way to setting things straight. This, my friends, is what union is about. Our brother is no longer alone. Corey, I don't want a recognition for myself, so I'll drop my name at the end just for you. But please, once again, if you're in a small office and in need of some kind of union help and don't know where to turn, email me at I'llFightForYouLightBlue@gmail.com. I'm going to read that again. I will fight the number 4, you, lightblue@gmail.com. I'll fight for you, lightblue@gmail.com. And so that's fantastic because this podcast started for those individuals in those small offices that would never be able to get training, that would never be able to get to a regional training because they can't afford it, any kind of expert training at regional or national because they can't afford it. And so people reached out to me to start this thing, and that's where this podcast, that's where it was born. And so now obviously it's turned a little bit because my union's failing us, but so that's fantastic. That's awesome stuff. Shout out to Cole Billups to remind him, don't forget the letter in your back pocket. Okay, so Cole, don't forget the letter in your back pocket. That's somebody that's concerned about you and that letter in your back pocket. So shout out to Cole Billups to remind him, don't forget the letter in your back pocket. And hopefully the letter says, go watch Lord of the Rings. And so hopefully that's what the letter's about. So Cole, don't forget the letter in your back pocket. Corey, I was hoping you could give a shout out to Cody McLean of the Beaver Creek Post Office in Dayton, Ohio. My father and I are both houndsmen, and I grew up knowing that there are 3 types of hounds out there. The first is a dog that simply won't hunt. He's nothing but a couch ornament, and he's got no fight in him. The second is a dog that has to be starved the night before, and he's only hunting because he's got a meal waiting for him when he's done his job. The third type of dog waits by the door every day just hoping that today is the day you're going to let him get off his leash to kill something. Cody McLean is that third dog. He's the baddest hunter in the whole woods, and when he howls at a scent, all the managers shiver in fear and hope he's not after them. And so that's awesome. We need more Cody McLeans, that third dog that's wanting to tear some shit up. So Cody McLean, somebody sending you some love, brother, and fantastic. Good for you. Good for you, because we want management to fear us. That will start happening when we take over. We will be the alphas in the room again, like I say. They will fear us again. They're running over us right now, but that will change. So Cody McLean, there you go, brother. Here's a family day. Sunday, May 25th, 2025, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Join us, enjoy our annual family day, an unforgettable day to have fun that will create cherished memories for the whole family. Activities, appetizers, open bar, lunch buffet, river pool, domino tournament, DJ, live music. Mayaquez Resort and Casino. And so I'll read that again because I know I just screwed that up. Family day, Sunday, May 25th, 2025, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Join us to enjoy our annual Family Day, an unforgettable day to have fun that will create cherished memories for the whole family. Branch meeting is 11 a.m. Activities, appetizers, open bar, lunch buffet, river pool, domino tournament, DJ, live music, Mayaquez Resort and Casino, 585 Puerto Rico 104 or PR-104, Mayaquez, Puerto Rico 00682. So there's another one. Brookfield, John, you know, the guy that I support from arbitration, the uniform guy. Make sure if you're getting uniforms, get them from him. All right, because this cat loves the city letter carrier. And anybody that's talked to him, I know that y'all talk to him on the phone a lot. Y'all say the same thing. Dude's a character. But he loves the city letter carrier. So John from Brookfield Uniforms is offering $100 off the full order, $150 CCAs plus 2 shirts free. With full order, no website does this. So his phone number is 718-872-2143 or email john9056@aol.com. john9056@aol.com. And that will be up on formatarbitration.com. So make sure y'all taking advantage of that. Thursday, June 19th, 2025, Cleveland Metro Park Zoo, NELC Branch 897 Family Outing. Cleveland Metro Parks Zoo, Thursday, June 19th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., Juneteenth National Holiday. Join your local union branch in 897 for a family day outing at the Cleveland Zoo. We'll be covering the cost of admission for all dues-paying members, their spouses, and children as well. We will also cover up to 2 guests for those without children. The union will also be providing a buffet lunch at the Nature Nook Pavilion inside the zoo at 12:30 p.m. You must RSVP by Sunday, June 1st, by emailing the names of adults and children attending to NELC Branch 897@gmail.com. And also you may call or text questions or concerns to Branch President Jamie Lukens at 330-819-0063. And this thing has jumped off. I mean, it is exploding right now. They've had a numerous amount of people reach out about this. So I know I'll be there because I love the zoo. My wife loves the zoo. So we're going to drive all the way to Cleveland so we can go to the zoo. So it's NELC Branch 897 Family Outing, Cleveland Metro Park Zoo, Thursday, June 19th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., Juneteenth National Holiday. I think James Henry will be there as well, if I'm not mistaken. Join your local union branch 897 for a family day outing at the Cleveland Zoo. We'll be covering the cost of admission for all dues-paying members, their spouses and children as well. We will also cover up to 2 guests for those without children. The union will also be providing a buffet lunch at the Nature Nook Pavilion inside the zoo at 12:30 p.m. You must RSVP by Sunday, June 1st, by emailing the names of adults and children attending to NELC Branch 897@gmail.com. And also you may call or text questions or concerns to Branch President Jamie Lukens at 330-819-0063. Corey, can you give a shout out for me? A special shout out to the City Carrier Shop Stewards who have reached out to James Brennan for the NRLCA president to help their brothers and sisters on the rural craft. This means a lot to me and shows solidarity to the letter carriers. Thank you to all of them. So absolutely. James Brennan has been on here before. So I'll read that again. Can you do a shout out for me? A special shout out to the City Carrier Shop Stewards who have reached out to James Brennan for NRLCA president to help their brothers and sisters on the rural craft. This means a lot to me and shows solidarity of the letter carriers. Thank you to all of them. So there you go, brother. Also, I think I screwed this up last week, so they sent it to me again, so I could do it again because I screwed it up. Announcement: join us and meet with James Henry to learn about his vision for the future of the NELC. Additional speakers joining are Corey Walton and Walter McGregory. April 15th, 2025, 7 p.m. Meeting to be held at the UAW Union Hall, 5820 East 900 North, Roanoke, Indiana, 46783. So I'll read that again because I screwed it up last week. Announcement: join us and meet with James Henry to learn about his vision for the future of the NELC. Additional speakers joining are Corey Walton and Walter McGregory. April 15, 2025 at 7 p.m. Meeting to be held at UAW Union Hall, 5820 East 900 North, Roanoke, Indiana, 46783. Then the next day, Bridge City Branch 323. Guest speakers, NELC Vice President James Henry and Corey Walton, host from 8 Arbitration, April 16th at 6 p.m., Logansport, Indiana, VFW 1023 Erie Avenue. That's April 16th at 6 p.m., Logansport, Indiana, VFW 1023 Erie Avenue. Members RSVP rkmac80 at yahoo.com. That's rkmac, M-A-C, 80 at yahoo.com. And so there's the shout-outs. I think that's all of them. Yep, that's all of them. And so let's get on with this me saying goodbye. The other day, I got the decision on my last arbitration. my last arbitration I've done. And so I wanted to talk about arbitration a little bit because it's something that's dear to me. And I lost it. I lost the decision. And I'm going to talk about the decision here in a second. But I wanted to talk about arbitration and what it's meant to me and saying goodbye to that, because that's been a huge part of who I've been over the last decade. It started in 2012 is when I started doing arbitration. And Lou Drass had asked that I consider being an advocate years ago, and I couldn't do it because my kids were young, and I didn't want to travel. I didn't want to be away from them. Because when they were born, I was always asleep because I was working at night at the jail and and during the day at the post office. So I was sleeping about 4 hours a day, and that was for about 6 years. And so my kids were all born. I was sleeping the whole time. I don't remember anything about when my kids were born. I hate that, but I was trying to provide. But when Pete Moss became business agent, he asked me, and this was at 2012, if I would consider being an arbitration advocate. And I was in a position at the time, I said, yeah, I'll do it, but I don't want to travel a whole lot. And so he told me I wouldn't. And so I agreed to do it and went up and went to advocate training, realized quickly it was something that I was going to enjoy. Before I started, I contacted my cousin, Monty Walton. He lives in Knoxville because he's an arbitrator. And so I was called him, and he was not an arbitrator with the Postal Service, but he was an arbitrator. And so I called him kind of to say, hey, what are you looking for out of an advocate? What are you looking for as an arbitrator? And the first thing he told me was be honest. Be honest. Don't ever go into an arbitration and let an arbitrator catch you being dishonest, because from then on, you'll be dishonest. No matter what, you'll always be dishonest to that arbitrator. And so I can honestly say out of about 200 cases, 200 arbitrations, now I don't have 200 decisions, but if as an advocate, you'll do arbitrations and then they'll settle them after you've done them. So out of about 200 arbitrations, I can honestly say I was never dishonest one day, not once. And that's something I take great pride in, because it would be very easy to be dishonest and win. And there's a lot of times if we were dishonest, we would have won. I would tell witnesses before we went in, never ever be dishonest. Even if you think it's going to sink your case, never be dishonest. Always tell the truth. I told you the story a long time ago about arbitrator Mayer. I was down in Mississippi. I think it was southern Mississippi. We were doing a case, and we were out in the hallway taking a break, and we weren't even talking about this case. We were talking about something else, and he was kind of, how long you been doing it? So we were talking. He had worked about 20 years for the APW at their national level and retired, and so he got on the panel, and so kind of, just feeling him out. And he was one of my favorite arbitrators too. He always wrote the best decisions. He is a very good writer. And so I remember we were out in the hallway, and I was just kind of picking his brain a little bit, and he told me that. He's like, Corey, he said, I can put up with a lot of stuff. He said, except dishonesty. He said, just be honest to me. He said, carriers that have done the worst of the worst, if they're just honest with me and there's some kind of remorse, he said, there's a good chance I'm going to try to find a way to bring them back. He tells me this right out in the hallway. Always be honest. Do not be dishonest. He said, if I catch you being dishonest, he said, more than likely you're gone. Whatever it is, we're going to lose. I remember Arbitrator Wolitz. I was down in Alabama, and there was a non-compliance case, and we were whipping management's ass. And so the advocate, asked for a break, and he said, Madam Arbitrator, can I talk with, Mr. Walton? And so she stepped out, and he's like, hey, let's just go on and settle this thing. I said, that's fine. I said, I'll bring the president in here of the local branch. Y'all can sit down and hammer this thing out. So that's what they did. Well, when I was in the hallway, Arbitrator Wolitz was out there, and she came up to me, and I just had a removal case in front of her in New Orleans. And she had remanded it back. And she said, Corey, I consider you a friend. And I was like, well, I appreciate that, Arbitrator Wolitz. And she says, I wouldn't have remanded that case back if it was anybody other than you. She said, but you've always been honest to me. She said, you've always presented yourself with honesty. And she's like, I would not have done it if it was anybody else. She said, but that Formal A you have there, and this person's long gone. She said, that Formal A you have down there, anytime he comes before me, I'm going to rule against you because of his dishonesty. That's what she told me. She said, anytime I come down there and he comes into that hearing, I'm going to rule against you because he's not honest with me. And so, hell, I called the business agent, told him, I said, hey, probably best if y'all change Formal A's because we're probably not going to have a good record in front of Arbitrator Wolitz if they stay. And so it shows you the importance of honesty. Honesty. You've got to be honest. I'll never forget, I was in Chattanooga doing an arbitration, and it was on a limited duty case. Management was refusing to give this guy work. And his restrictions were so bad that, it was going to be a difficult case for us. We lost the case, matter of fact, is in front of Arbitrator Lawrence Roberts. And that's what he said. He said, you've constricted your management so much with your restrictions that there's no possible way for them to find work for you. But I remember I met with the branch president and this grievant at a restaurant. And that's where we prepped the case because I was coming in late. And I said, hey, if y'all can just meet me, I got to eat. And meet me there and we'll go over the case, in the restaurant. I told the guy exactly what to do. And I said, now listen to me. I said, whatever you do, don't be dishonest. Don't be dishonest. And he said, oh, no, there's no reason to be dishonest. I said, okay. I said, well, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to go over. And he had it down pat. The next morning, we get in there. I go over a direct question with him that starts cross-examination. And the advocate, she starts asking questions. And I can tell they've got something on this cat. They have got something, and he does not see it coming. And so I'm looking at her, the advocate, and she's like, now you stated that your restrictions just began on this date. That's right. And so I'm thinking to myself, they're fixing to get my guy. There's something I don't know about. It's not in this file. And they're fixing to get him. She's like, okay, so you're sure that your restrictions started on this date? This is when it happened? Yes. So you never filed a claim 4 or 5 years ago about this very same thing? No. She reaches down. And the worst thing in arbitration is when somebody reaches down. I love it. I do it for effect too, man. I'm just ruffling through shit, when I'm doing it. So reaches down and pulls out this documentation. She's like, Mr. Arbitrator, I'm going to include this as management exhibit 1. So she has to give it to me first, and I can object to it or say, fine, let it in. So I look at it, and it's a claim of his from 5 years ago. The very same injury, the very same thing. And so I look at him, and the arbitrator's looking at me kind of grinning, because Arbitrator Roberts and I, we did 1,000 cases together, man. We did a bunch of cases together. And he said, Mr. Walton, I said, would it do any good for me to object? He's like, no, it wouldn't. I said, all right. And so she did that 6 times. 6 times she caught this guy lying. After the 6th time, I said, can we hang on just a second? I said, Mr. Arbitrator, can we hang on just a second? He said, sure. I said, I need to address the grievant. He said, well, that's probably wise. And honestly, you can ask Pete Moss. because I called him as soon as I left to make him aware of what I did. But I told him right there, I said, you tell one more lie on that stand under oath, and I'll withdraw this grievance. That's what I said right there in front of him. I said, if you're dishonest one more time in this hearing, I'll withdraw this grievance. I said, because my reputation's at stake and the NELC's reputation's at stake, and you will not continue to sit up there and be dishonest. And I had him answer. I said, do you understand? Yes. I said, okay. I said, carry on. Of course, we lost, but God, dog, I mean, after the sixth time, you're thinking, my man, are you not catching on? That every time they're asking you something, they got something on you. And so I probably should have done it after the first time, but I'm thinking, surely he's not going to continue to lie. And he did. And so, that was the first and only time that's ever happened. But I told him right there in front of the arbitrator that if he continues to be dishonest, I'll withdraw this case because my reputation's at stake, and I cannot risk my reputation for you being dishonest. And so I remember that, my cousin telling me that, always be honest. Just always be honest. He said, and secondly, always be prepared. Know what you're talking about. Always be prepared. And I can honestly say, out of every case I've ever done, nobody has ever outworked me. Nobody has ever outprepared me. I've always come in and outworked every advocate I've ever been against. And nobody has ever outprepared me in an arbitration. I can honestly say that. I have always won the arbitration, even though I didn't always win the award. I've always won the hearing. And so arbitration was special to me. I absolutely loved it. You will have the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. You will lose cases that you know for a fact you've won. And you will win cases you know for a fact you've lost. And that's just the way arbitration is. Anytime anybody ever asks me, how does it look? 50-50. I will never say anything. I won't tell them, well, we got a pretty good shot. 50-50. After you do it for so long, you understand you can go in there with the best case and lose it. You can catch management line. I caught management line before in a case in New Orleans. They've lied so much at the informal. They came in and I caught them lying throughout the formal A. I've caught the concurring official line and still lose a case. The worst decision I've ever gotten was from Zach Morris down in Alabama. And I went over it in one of my episodes. But management lied the entire way through it, and I called him. He lied in his decision. He wanted this guy so bad. He lied in his decision about things that transpired in the hearing just so he could fire this cat. And so, best decisions. I've had some great decisions, man. My best decisions, I would have to say Memphis is one of them, where we got the district manager, because that was the first time in history we were able to get a district manager and 3 managers. In that hearing, I put up the Memphis miniseries, matter of fact, if y'all can remember that. And so I had one witness, Jason Atchley. He did a fantastic job for us. His testimony lasted an entire day. And so winning that one was probably one of the best decisions because we were able to get outside the realm of just local management, supervisors or managers or postmasters. We were able to go after and get a district manager. Now, of course, Pony Boy removed the arbitrator because management didn't like the decision. And he agreed to call jointly with labor, and they removed this guy, which was devastating to us because it gives the arbitrators the idea that, oh, well, if I do something like that, they'll remove me on the spot. I won't even make it through the next contract. And so I think that that's one of the greatest disservices that Barner's done to the city letter carrier was getting involved with arbitrations. He amended that decision. When we're talking about noncompliance, how difficult it is now for noncompliance because they've done away. He's agreed with Lloyd to do away with cease and desist, which is devastating. He amends decisions because management calls him saying it's not contractual, even though the decision had numerous sites where arbitrators had done the same thing. And so, I would say Memphis is one of my favorites. Let's see, I've got Lake Charles. Y'all heard me go over those a bunch of times. Lake Charles was great decisions because, there's so many issues going on down there with noncompliance. That's where Arbitrator Roberts in the hearing before he left told labor, he said, there is a figure. there is a figure. He said, we haven't hit it yet. He said, but we will. He said, if I keep coming down here, we will. And so I use that to this day, him saying that. There is a figure. I also used the term, Arbitrator Roberts used to always say, this will be a final resolution to an ongoing issue. And that's what I say the dogs of war are, is a final resolution to an ongoing issue. That was him. And so arbitrators are great people. Some will talk a lot, some will not talk at all. I've gotten in plenty of arguments with arbitrators right inside the arbitration room. Arbitrator Miles and I used to go at it in arbitration. But other great decisions, I love the case I had in Chicago, but they settled it, right after the hearing. They settled that and brought the guy back. I'd say Jackson, Mississippi, the joint statement case, one of the best cases I've been involved with as a witness is Hattiesburg. Jason actually was the advocate. But losses, I've had some devastating losses. Arbitrator Bayhackle, I would have kicked her off the panel years ago. Had an 8-5G case, off assignment overtime. We had just got a great decision back from Arbitrator August where we went forward, and she gave us escalated monetary award. Labor was fishing around for arbitrators. They're very good at that. They don't just give up like we do. We'll throw our hands up. We should have never taken this forward. Now look at us. Woe is me. Labor just keeps on going. They're going to keep on going until they get that one arbitrator that will give a dissenting view. And they found it in Bayhackle. She doesn't agree with escalated monetary awards, but, you got to take it forward. So we've got all this history on escalated monetary awards, and she rules against us. It's an 8-5G case, off assignment overtime. And if y'all remember me talking about it, management turned in a Braverman decision talking about rule of reason, which has nothing to do with off assignment overtime. Matter of fact, I had the Formal A from management acknowledge that it did not deal with rule of reason and went over rule of reason. She ruled on rule of reason on an 8-5G case. So that's arbitration, man. Another was a 16-7. I remember this. 16-7. It was in front of Arbitrator Roberts. And it was so ridiculous that I'm like, in the hearing, matter of fact, in my closing, I'm like, why am I here? That's what I tell them. I said, why am I here? This is absolutely ridiculous. Because what happened was the carrier, they told him to go stick on another route, and he refused. And so the MCSO was in the building. So the MCSO and the station manager come up to this guy. They're in his case, berating this guy. Now, he sits on his ledge with his arms crossed. And this is, honest to God, truth. This is in the case file. And they're telling him to get up and go do this. And he's like, I need my shop steward. And they're saying, you're not getting your shop steward. You need to go do this. He's not moving. He says, I need my shop steward. And they refuse to give him a shop steward. They just sit there and keep berating this guy while he's on his case ledge, just sitting there. So they just put him off the clock and said that he was intimidating because he was sitting on his case ledge with his arms crossed, and they felt fearful. And so in the hearing, I was like, was he at your case or were y'all at his? Or we were at his. I said, were you outside the case or inside the case? We're inside the case. I said, and y'all are fearful of him. Yeah, why didn't you leave the case? Well, because we're management, and carriers are not going to dictate to us on the working floor. I said, well, hang on, but you said you were scared of him. Yes. And you're in his case. It made no sense. And I lost the damn thing. Like, how can you lose that? Another one was Arbitrator Miles. Another 16-7, where this carrier had mail in the back of their vehicle. And all these people were out there looking at this mail in the back of the vehicle. This was like 10 a.m. The carrier's out there delivering mail. So they call the OIG, or postal inspector. They come out there, and they see it. Yep, that's mail. And so this carrier delivers till like 4 o'clock and comes back, and they said, hey, we need to talk to you. They give him an investigative interview. They finish the investigative interview. He goes home, and they're like, hey, don't come in tomorrow. You're on emergency placement. And I was, of course, I use Mittenthal saying it has to be immediate. You're an immediate loss of pay. There is no time. When you talk about immediate, it has to be immediate. And Arbitrator Miles, I was killing management in there. And he said, well, they had to do the investigative interview just to make sure they had all the facts. I'm like, what? That goes completely against 16.7. And so you will have those, I'm telling you, that you know for a fact you've won and you will lose it. You will know for a fact you've lost and you'll win it. And so that's arbitration. And there's nothing I'd rather do than arbitration. I absolutely loved it. I will leave this arena. Since 2012, I'm 106-40. And I've lost more cases than most advocates will ever do. And that breaks my heart. It bothers me every day that I went in there 40 times and lost. And so you always think about things you can do differently. But like I said, I was never out prepared. I would get a case, and you would spend, the good thing about me is I have a walking route, and so I would always carry a pad. And while you're walking, you're thinking of questions, of things that just don't make sense. Traps you're setting for management, and you're writing these down, and you'd come on with 6 or 7 pages of notes, and you would write those in your case file. Most people wrote their notes on a pad. I wrote mine in my case file. The only thing in my pad was a page number. And so I remember Ray Mackey from Clarksville. We had a case one time. He was TA, and afterwards he was like, man, that's amazing. You were great and this and that. He said, I thought we were in trouble when I looked at your pad and only saw a page number. And so I was like, all my notes are in my case file because I don't want to be going back and forth. I want to stay in that case file. And so all my notes are like above sentences or on the side and all that. So yeah, I would go over the case file at home and just spend endless amount of hours. I'd always start with management's position first and highlight things and then see if we answered them in our position. And so I think that you have to be a very quick thinker. You have to have that case file memorized. I've always said that you have it memorized. I don't want management to come in there and get anything over on me because I didn't have that case memorized. So if it was 50 pages or 5,000 pages, you'd spend as much time as necessary to memorize that case file. I was the Larry Bird of advocates. I talk more shit than anybody you've ever known. I was the biggest shit talker in history. I told you about the time I was in New Orleans, and this guy, he was terrible. And I knew he was going to be fired. There was nothing I could do for this cat. And so we go out in the hall, and Labor's sitting there, and they're talking to me, and I was like, y'all need to go on and pre-arb this thing. And they're like, pre-arb it? Why? She's like, y'all going to have him resign? I said, no. Y'all going to bring him back with full back pay. Why would we do that? Because y'all are fixing to lose. They're laughing. Why are we losing? I said, because I'm here. So they're looking at me like, who the fuck are you? And we won. And so I told them. And so I was in, when Jay and I were in Hattiesburg, I was the witness, and Jay's in his suit, and I'm in a dress pants and a dress shirt, and we come walking in, and this is a joint statement case. And I remember Greg White was the advocate. Now, he used to be the state president for Mississippi, and he got hurt, so he went over into labor. And Mr. Eubanks was the TA. And we go walking in, and Eubanks, I think his name was Clifford Eubanks maybe, but he said, looks like y'all going to a funeral. And I said, we are, y'all's. We just kept walking, and we won that one too. But Mississippi, they had one. I had a friend of mine that was TAing with me, and they had the area labor manager come in, and he was TAing, and this guy was an ultimate douche. And he wanted everybody to know his position, how great he was, and what his title was. And so beforehand, I had just walked into this station, and came up to me and introduced himself and said, I'm Corey Walton. Oh, Corey Walton. Okay, yeah, we've heard about you. I said, okay, so hopefully it was good. And I said, where's the bathroom? Oh, you're supposed to be some expert advocate, and you can't even find the bathroom in a station? He said, you must not be great as they say. I said, oh, no. I said, I'm fixing to show you what I'm great at as soon as we walk in that room. And so we go in there and he objects. And so Miles was the arbitrator who we went at it all the time. So the TA objects, objection. And I said, objection? I said, who are you? And he's like, I'm so-and-so. I said, I was being facetious. I said, what I mean is you don't mean anything in here. I said, when I said, who are you? I really don't care who you are. You don't mean anything. I said, you can't object. And so the arbitrator was siding with them. And Miles was like, well, if this advocate, I said, I'll tell you what, Arbitrator Miles. I said, if he objects again, I said, me and the witness are going to get up and leave. I said, how's that? I said, I will not be run over in here by you or him. I said, we both pay your salary. Don't forget that. This guy here, he's either going to be the advocate or the TA. I said, he will not be both. I said, so if he objects again, we're leaving. And so Miles looked at me and says, are you going to be the advocate? And he said, no, I'm TA. And he said, okay, we'll let the advocate, he'll object. And so that's arbitration. So I loved it. I absolutely loved arbitration, man. There was nothing I would rather do. I was at home in arbitration. You got to think that it's how difficult it is to be average. Just 50%. How difficult it is, because management thinks they're just as right as we do. They think they are just as right as we are. And so you got arbitrators that I'm convinced some of them are, if their record is such and such, they're thinking, well, I got to get back on this panel. And so I'm going to have to even this up a little bit. And that's the reason you'll get some really crappy decisions. But just how difficult it is to be average, 50-50. And so I was awful proud. I rarely ever do I talk about my record, but just knowing that if I went in there 10 times, 7 times, we were going to come out a winner. And so to me, I put that time in. I put that work in to be a good advocate and to be better than average. And which blows my mind because, you have to be very persuasive in arbitration. It's the ultimate test. It's the ultimate mano a mano. Us against them in front of somebody neutral. Now, they'll always have their arbitrators and we'll have ours. But for the most part, it's the ultimate and who is the most persuasive in the arguments. Out of 150 cases, they're not all winners. 106 and 40, those 106 are not all winners. So, you take pride in the fact that you're persuasive and able to convince somebody neutral about your position. That's what it's mind-boggling about James Henry, that he's at 84%, as many cases as he's done. 84%. It's crazy. It's mind-boggling to think that, but it just shows you how persuasive that guy is in the ultimate setting. Mano a mano against front and somebody neutral. I thought I was doing pretty good. And then you hear about that, dude's 84%. You're thinking, damn, I should have spent a little bit more time in the case file. But any new advocate, enjoy it, man. Enjoy it. I drove everywhere. I never flew. So if I was going to Lake Charles, I drove 10 hours. I drove to New Orleans, all over the southern states, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. Drove every inch of every state. Every inch of Tennessee I've driven. The smallest of towns. They've got one hotel. I remember one case, it was removal down in Baker, Louisiana, and they had one hotel. And when you go in there, they had steps, no elevator. So you had to carry your luggage up the steps, and there are people doing drugs under the steps. And so I go in, and the room was not very good. And so the next day, Miles comes in. If you know Arbitrator Miles, he's always late. If it starts at 9, he'll be in about 9:15. So he comes in and his suit is a mess. And I'm thinking, damn, what'd you do? Do you have that in your trunk? And so it's wrinkled and everything. So he sits down and he called me John Boy, off the Waltons. And he's like, oh, we got John Boy here today. And I was like, how are you, sir? He's like, did you stay at that hotel? I was like, sure did. He's like, I slept in my suit. I slept in my suit. He said, I slept on the sheets. He said, I didn't even get in the sheets. He said, was that place not a disaster? And I was like, it could have been better. But that explained his suit the way it was. And so, yeah. So today I say goodbye. I say goodbye to arbitration, the thing that I loved more than anything else, the ultimate arena. And so I leave that arena 106-40. And so I'll always regret those 40. I'll always think maybe there's something I could have done better. But 106 ain't too damn bad. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it, man. That was my greatest passion, was that setting. It really was. And so what I may do next week is I've got 2 suits. They're brand new. One I wore once, and it was in Memphis. Very nice suit, high dollar. I'll give that away. I might do that. I was going to give it to Goodwill, but I'll just give it to one of y'all. Whoever's an advocate that needs a brand new suit, I've got a gray one, brand new. Barely, I don't know that I've wore it at all. But what happened was, right as they started to blackball me, I got 2 new suits. At the same time, I lost about 25 pounds. And so they no longer fit. And so I got blackballed from arbitration. I couldn't do, I never traveled, because that was my business agent getting back at me for this podcast. That's the reason I was going to take his damn job, is because he failed the city letter carriers and continues to do so. But so I got blackballed from that. So I didn't do any cases hardly ever. And so this last case I lost. And so I just wore the same black suit I've wore since 2012. And so I'll give those away next week. So I'll give you the measurements. They're, like I said, they're brand new. I wore one once. I don't know that I wore the gray one, and it's very nice too, at all. And so I'll give those away. So if you're a new advocate looking for a suit, I've got 2, and I'll get you to email me. I'll give you the measurements, okay? Because I think I was about 265. I'm 6'1", about 265 at the time. I'm about down to 250 right now, and so I got those when I was a little bigger. And so if anybody's around that size, starting out as an advocate, I'll give you the measurements next week and I'll send them to you, okay? And y'all can have 2 very nice suits. Honesty and integrity, okay? Honesty, integrity. If I can say anything, the 2 most important things, honesty, integrity, all right? If you have a love for the city letter carrier, it's going to take care of your preparation. If you love us, it's going to take care of your preparation. That's what I've always said. If you love me, you're going to succeed, because you're going to do the things you have to do to win. And that's what you'll do, okay? So honesty, integrity. Work with those 2 things, always. Even if it's going to hurt you. Honesty, integrity, all right? There are going to be occasions when you can be dishonest and win. Lose. Lose before you find yourself being dishonest. Okay? Your reputation is everything. It's everything you've got. Don't ever be dishonest, because from then on, an arbitrator is going to say, oh, here's this dude. Here's this cat. Dishonest. Going to do whatever they have to do to win. And so don't be that person. Do not be that person. Always work with integrity. Like I said, all the arbitrators loved me back when I was doing it. They loved me. Now, they would rule against me some, but there's no doubt I won some cases based solely off being honest and integrity. They know that you're coming with them with the truth, okay? Very passionate. Y'all have heard my closing arguments. Very passionate for the city letter carrier because I love them dearly. And so, today is my goodbye. My goodbye to arbitration. And I will leave that arena and giving it every single thing that I've got. It was going to have to happen anyway because I'm traveling so much with the CLC now. I've always said if I couldn't give it 100%, I was going to step away from it. I never thought that day would come because I loved it. Loved it. I had a passion for it. I love that setting. Just getting in management's ass. They're going to be up on that stand just shredding them under cross. People that I remember a case down in Louisiana. Guy's name was Jacob Sains, and they were accusing him of violating his restrictions because he would call in sick, and he owned 2 vape stores. And so he'd call in sick and would go to that vape store, and he would just sit there. And so management comes in and they video him. They come in, they walk in, video him, and turn around and walk back out. Don't say anything to him. They just walk in, video him, walk back out. So they fired him, saying that he was in violation of his restrictions. And of course, when they're on cross-examination, I'm like, well, what was he doing? Sitting there. Well, what's his restriction? Well, he can't stand for so long and he can't stand. I said, okay, so those are working restrictions, right? For when he's at work. Yeah. I said, well, was he working when you went in there? Well, he was sitting on a stool. I said, okay, well, how'd he violate his restrictions if he's sitting on a stool? Because that's the only video they had. But I remember Pete Moss sending me there specifically. He said, hey, this guy that's going to be their concurring official, he said, I want you to get in this dude's ass. He said, I want you to go down there and wreck this guy. I said, okay, I'll do it. Normally I sit by the arbitrator. This time the TA was sitting by the arbitrator. I was sitting by the witness. And I scooted up as close as I could to that dude and wore that cat out. I mean, wore his ass out under cross. And so that's the type of stuff I loved. I loved it. So I'm rambling now, but saying goodbye to arbitration. The greatest passion I've had as far as unionism, anything with the union, was arbitration. I love that setting. Absolutely loved it. Love helping now. I get a lot of advocates call. We talk a lot about case files. We talk a lot about sites. I have a list of sites over here that for everything. And I talk about those. And I will continue to talk about arbitration forever. I said I'm going to do this until I retire. And even when I'm EVP, I'm going to continue to do from 8 arbitration. And we'll get back into education. And so, I'll continue to talk about arbitration. But goodbye. Goodbye to something I love so much. I will leave that arena with my head held up high. Gave it everything I had, man. I left it all on the field, as they say, in arbitration. And so I'm going to talk about this loss. My last one. It made me think I may go back and just do a non-compliance case just to get a win. I came in with a win in 2012. My very first case was a win. I can't leave with a loss, I may do a non-compliance case, get a good win under my belt, and go out like that. It's hard to go out as a loser. So, but I am. But I've got this case, and it's a great case if you're doing any kind of JSOV training. And so you're always looking for lessons. Always looking for lessons to learn, to educate, to how to advance your grievance files. Now, we didn't prevail in this particular case. However, there's always plenty to learn. There's always plenty to learn. So if I'm advising anybody, take time to study, recent JSOV decisions. And this one's out of Henderson, Tennessee. It's Hendersonville. And so there's always plenty to learn. So take time to study recent decisions, recent JSOV. And so a lot of people are having JSOV training classes coming up at your officer training and RAP sessions. And so this will be a great one to go over. And because you can't go into training and just have all wins. You need to have losses so you can learn from mistakes. And so this would be a great one to have in your repertoire, as you say. So when you do JSOV training, I love to have great cases that we've won. I always use basically the same ones. But this one would be a great one to have, to go over, to learn from. Very good case. The thing is, you could tell the arbitrator wanted to get this individual. In the hearing, you could tell by the questions, he wanted to get this individual. When you're reading the decision, you can tell he wanted to get this individual. We just didn't do enough to do it. And this individual, this postmaster, we've had issues with her since 2010. The very first decision in the case file was when I was a formal Step A rep. And we rung her up for a violation of 115.4. That's 2010. And that's what I told in my closing. I was like, how things come full circle. Because the person I was going against was the DRT member at the time. And so Formal A in 2010, I'm the advocate, and the DRT member for the case we were hearing is the person that was Formal A back then. And so it gave a great history. JB was my witness, also my branch president. They did a fantastic job JB put a fantastic case file together, such history. The thing we were lacking was a trigger. And that's the most important thing. What have you done for me lately, as they say? What have you done lately to bring about this grievance, or does this just sour grapes, as they say? Are we just saying, I just don't like her coming in here. Let's just file a grievance, compile all this history, and it's just sour grapes. And so you have to be careful with those kind of grievances. We had a decent trigger. Management called a meeting, a labor management meeting, and we go in there, and the president says, hey, we've got issues here. And that's the reason the meeting was called, because the district labor manager called the meeting because of all the grievances coming out of there. They didn't do anything. No IMIP, no nothing. And so the president, Dana Chambliss, she files the grievance. She said, hey, y'all aren't doing anything about this behavior. You have no IMIP. You lied to me about that. So we're going to make this incident date this. And that's when we came in there and did these surveys. And so the problem was, and you will see this when the dogs of war start doing training, one of the biggest problems, and somebody reached out to me the other day and says, what happens if nobody wants to come testify? And that's what we ran into. We had one in particular, JB called and called, left messages and called, never called us back. Matter of fact, she quit because of this behavior of this manager. She quit. Would never get a hold of us. And there was probably 4 in particular out of the station I needed to testify. 4. They had great surveys. I could kind of tie it into, well, this is still ongoing, because they say every day. If I can just get one of them to show up, not one would show up. Not one. And so I had JB calling. My branch president was calling. I was calling. They were either busy, which I understand, or would not return our calls. And so you really don't have a good trigger. You have the IMIP. They lied to us about that, so I played that extensively. JB did a fantastic job. And one of the things that, when you talk about working with integrity, working with honesty, I will never lie to anybody. And so I could have said, hey, here's my witness list. I'm going to call 20 carriers, unless you stipulate to their statements. But I didn't do that because I'm not going to lie to anybody. So I just sent my witness list as JB and Dana. And so I called, the advocate, and I talked, and I said, hey, would y'all stipulate to these witness statements? No, we're not going to stipulate. Well, hell, I can't get nobody to testify. I can't get nobody to come testify. And so you're kind of screwed there because, if you could stipulate to witness statements, then, you're pretty in good shape. Just say, hey, if they're going to testify, they're going to testify to this. But, the advocate's just doing their job. She's like, no, I'm not going to stipulate to any witness statements. So, up until the last night, we're calling, trying to get somebody to show up. In the hearing, they objected to JB's testimony, his contentions, where he went over the surveys. And they're saying, hey, they're not stipulating these surveys. He can't go over them. And the arbitrator agreed. He said, yeah, you can't go over your contentions. And that happens. It happened to me in Jackson, Mississippi. It happened with a carrier. It was a JSOV case. Jason actually was my witness, and they had a labor specialist come in from another area, and he's some advocate specialist. And he objected to every single thing Jay said. Every question he objected to. And that's just kind of how they do, trying to get you off track. And but Jay was going over the witness statements, and they objected to that. And they're like, the carriers need to go over those statements. And so I went over formal step A, witness statements and all that stuff. And it was arbitrator August, and she agreed. She's like, yeah, you're not going to go over witness statements even if they're in your contentions. Some arbitrators will. Some arbitrators won't. And so this arbitrator on this case, he wouldn't let JB do it. So it was the ultimate kind of mind game. You're taking shots whenever you can, trying to slip things in whenever you can. And under cross-examination, I remember there was 2 advocates for them, a female and a male. And under cross, the male crossed JB, which is foolish. I would never cross JB. Anytime they cross JB, I'm winning. So, because he shreds them, because he has the case memorized. He hardly ever has to look at a page. He's that into it. And so They crossed him, and they was like, so you're wanting us to remove somebody from supervising city letter carriers, and you don't have any witness statements. You don't have, and he's messing up, right? Because they've already objected to JB going over those things. He says, so you have no proof of anything that you've been talking about. JB looks at me, and I look at the arbitrator, and I said, Mr. Arbitrator. He said, yes, sir. He said, I agree. And I didn't even say anything. I just said, Mr. Arbitrator. He said, you've now opened the door up for those statements. He said, y'all have objected to him getting into the statements. He said, you've now opened the door up for the statements. He said, so Mr. Leith, he said, you can get into the statements if you want to. So JB just goes over the statements. When I redirect, we go over all the statements. And so the statements were open. Now, in his decision, he went against that. But in the hearing, he opened that advocate opened that door for those statements, and JB took advantage. JB looked at me. Like I said, when he said that, JB looked at me, and I looked at the arbitrator and just said, Mr. Arbitrator, yes, you can get in those statements. So it was the ultimate cat and mouse game, Then they come up. This was back in June or July. We had to continue because our testimony was all day, and they just couldn't pick another date. And so it happened, came up last month, and they didn't call any witnesses. And I raised hell about that because that's dishonest. Because you gave me a witness list and I didn't hear anything from you. And I think the arbitrator addresses that, in his decision about them not calling any witnesses, because when you gave me a witness list, I'm preparing for those witnesses, and you never called me and told me anything different. And so I remember for about the first 10 minutes of my closing was talking about how dishonest they were. And I was hammering that and talking about how that took time away from my life, time away from us doing things at night, my wife and I going out to dinner, going to a movie. Took time away from my life because they told me they were going to bring somebody to testify, and they were dishonest to me. And I said, I take exception to that. And so he acknowledged that in his decision. But he said, ultimately, he wanted to hear from the aggrieved. He wanted to hear from the aggrieved. And so he was saying, hey, I wanted to hear from some carriers that worked on the floor. I didn't hear from any carriers that worked on the floor about what they were going through. And I get that, and that's something that you're going to run into. You're going to have cases where the witness is not available. I've had removal cases on attendance where I can't get the grievant to show up. On attendance. Now, just think about a removal case on attendance and the carrier don't show up, the grievant. That's the ultimate, kick in the ass, is that I got an attendance case and the no grievant. So it happens. It happens. And you'll have the branch president calling. You'll send certified letters. You'll send mail, text, calls, emails, nothing. Nobody. And that kind of happened here. And so, you just do the best you can. I thought we had a great case anyway. They did a fantastic job testifying. Dana and JB. JB's always he's the best of the best at everything he does. And he just kills it in arbitration. But at the end of the day, the arbitrator said, hey, regardless of them testifying or not, this is y'all's burden. They may have been dishonest, I agree, but this is y'all's burden. He put the history of this individual. You could tell he wanted to get this manager. You could tell in his decision he wanted to. But at the end of the day, he said, hey, I wanted to hear from the aggrieved. I wanted to hear from those carriers to tell me what was going on. Preemptively, I put in cites after I got finished lambasting management about being dishonest. I said, Mr. Arbitrator, they talk about no carriers in here. So I had all sites where there was no carrier testimony: Hattiesburg, Jackson, Memphis, all of those. I said there was no carrier testimony in Memphis. It was just Jason Ashley. There was none in Hattiesburg, just me. There was none in Jackson, just Jason Ashley. And there's none in this one. It's just this person. I said, so ran over formal step A again. How, that's the time for the file to be complete and full and all that. I said, and this is our file. This is our position. And so in these cases, just witness testimony from the formal A or the informal, that wasn't good enough. And so he said, no, I wanted to hear from the aggrieved. I wanted to hear from the carriers. And so we lost. And but it's a great case. Like I said, if y'all got training coming up, some kind of regional training, if y'all do any kind of JSOV training, that's a great case to put in there. It was a fight, a dog fight. All the objections and stuff. And we did a fantastic job. I'll always hold my head up high anytime I come out of arbitration. But The last case, the big L, the big loser. And so, but it was a fun case. We had a blast, man. Jason, JB and I, we always have a great time, man, in arbitration. He's a fantastic witness. And I love when he says, all right, manager, y'all have any cross? And they start asking him questions because they doom themselves. I have never seen him get befuddled or stumped, ever. And he will always destroy management under cross. He's going to be a great advocate. And I'm going to make sure when we take over, he's used. Our business agent don't use him because of me and because of the podcast. You're talking about one of the most educated individuals in the union is Jason Leith, JB. And he is that good. An educator, he's that good. An advocate, he's that good. And they don't use him because of me. Can you believe that? Even when I'm EVP, I'm going to use people, even if they hate my guts, even if they talk about me. I'm going to use them if they're good. I'm not going to cut off my nose to spite my face. How stupid is that? If they've been online talking about what a big of a piece of shit I am, I'm going to call them. Hey, I need you. Will you help? Yep. All right. I'm going to put you on my team. Because it's not about me. It's not about my pride. And that's what's ruining this union. Our president is the most prideful son of a bitch I've ever seen. Yeah, my business agent is full of pride and has ruined my region because of his pride. I've never seen anything like that in my life, the pride of these people, where they will cut off their nose to spite their face. They will intentionally hurt the city letter carrier because of their pride. JB would be involved with anything that I do if I was business agent. I tell him to come down there, look at the board, pick whatever dates you want for arbitration, go do cases. Any training, he's going to be involved with it. And so I think that's ridiculous. But yeah, if you're doing any JSOV case, get that file, get that case and use it. I don't mind if you use a loser of mine. I've lost 40. So there's plenty out there to get. There's plenty of losses. And I hate every one of them. I hate them, man, but I gave it everything I've gotten. I did. I gave it everything I had. And I absolutely loved it. Loved it. All right, so goodbye. Goodbye to arbitration, what I love so much, one of the loves of my life, arbitration. There's your good case to go over if you got regional training. You get some regional training in at my expense. All right, the last JSOV case of mine. And it'll be a good case. We'll use it in the Dogs of War when they're training there because it tells you the importance of those witness statements and getting witnesses to testify. It's one of the biggest things we'll have to deal with is witness testimony because some of them are just too scared. They're too scared to come in there and testify. It's just how it is. And so you'll have to overcome that as best you can. A lot of times we've been able to, and it's just sometimes you can't. And so, what are you going to tell a carrier that's manager is so bad they're scared to come in there because they're afraid of what's going to happen the next day when they go back to work? That's why the reason a lot of these remedies were asking that there'll be no retaliation. But hell, that's 30 days from now. That decision is going to come out 30 days. But the Dogs of War will be good because, after the hearing, they're going to stay in that station. They're going to stay involved with that station. That manager opens their mouth, they're going to be in there and handling business. And they're going to be ruthless, relentless, Anyway. So there you have it. My goodbye and my last case, the L. So y'all can use it. Use it. All right, let's go on to this 6-day count. I'm going to read for an hour. All right? I'm going to read for 1 hour. I got to do this. A lot of people are getting involved with the 6-day counts. I may read it again, and then I may read it after that. I think that everybody, every shop steward, every carrier should be well-versed in a 6-day count. But when I'm EVP, management is going to have to sell me on a joint process. Now, they may come up with one before I get in there. But they would have to sell me on a joint process. Anything I can't grieve, they're going to have to sell me on it, that it's worth my while. Section 2, 6-day counts, as many flaws as there are. With 6-day counts, managers coming in, we're taking out 4 routes before we even get started, and just destroying stations with core, everything like that. At least I can grieve it. At least I can grieve it. Now, you have stations now where MCSOs are just parked in there, berating carriers, belittling carriers, intimidating carriers. I get calls like that all the time. Those are things there that dogs of war go in on that. You know, if that happens, they'll sit in there with them. They'll sit in there with them and watch them. And we'll do that. And so, but I can grieve it. Joint process, I can't grieve. Anything I can't grieve benefits management. Why? Because I'm the only one that grieves. As a city letter carrier, I grieve. Management doesn't grieve anything. They've never grieved in the history of the NELC. Management has never grieved once because they can't grieve. That's my process. And so anything I come into an agreement with management that I can't grieve, that my carriers can't grieve, they're going to have to sell me on that. And so that'll be a tough sell. Definitely won't have numbers in it, though. You're not going to have figures and numbers at times. You're not going to have any of that, I assure you. All right, let's carry on. Note, for information and advice on reading the Form 1840B, see the Forms Description section of this book. Always use the Tax Employee Everything report when reviewing time records. This report will show all the carrier moves on the time clock and any moves added or deleted manually by a manager. For an explanation on how to read, see the 2011 NELC Letter Carrier Resource Guide. The Form 1838 from the days of inspection is the most important Form 1838 to review. You're looking to see if any street time was deducted. If street time was deducted, you should see this time in the waiting street time box on the Form 1838 from the day of the inspection. This box is found on the bottom right-hand corner of Form 1838. This is a big deal because waiting street time will be deducted when the street time is transferred from Form 1838 to Form 1840. This amount of time will also disappear every day from now on when the route is adjusted and or territory is transferred to another route. Now, this is the most important thing. This is numero uno in 6-day counts. Nothing more important than this, street waiting time. Remember that. If management is going to steal, it is going to be street waiting time. And I've said that any training I do, I talk about street waiting time. If you do anything, the first thing is to look at that 1838 and see if management puts you in for any street waiting time or waiting street time. Okay? They will steal from you for you doing things that you do every single day. Comfort stops. They will steal from you. Loading mail from the back to the front. They will steal from you. If you drop something, they will steal from you. And so make sure, waiting street time on the 1838. Make sure when you do carrier consultations that the carriers are challenging, contesting every single minute. When we talk about 6-day counts, we're talking about saving minutes. That's what when I do my training. It's saving minutes. When I talk to my carriers, saving minutes. It's all about minutes. Management's trying to steal as many as they can, and we're trying to keep as many as we can. They are trained on stealing. That's all they know how to do. They will steal by falsifying clock rings, tax clock rings. They will steal by falsifying training, hip training. They steal. They're expert thieves, and so you have to catch them. Every one of them, they do nothing but steal, and they're educated on how to steal. Their bosses want them stealing from us. It's all they know. And so waiting street time. Make sure on the 1838 shop stewards, carriers, you're looking at those 1838s, finding that wait street time and challenging every single minute, okay? If any waiting time is recorded on Form 3999, the route examiner should write comments explaining why they put the carrier on waiting time. Look at Form 3999 to see what time of day waiting time is recorded. Next, look at the examiner's comments to see if a comment is written at the same time. If there are no comments or the comments do not justify the deduction, the street time deduction made is improper. The 3999 audit trail report is generated from the DOIS system and shows some of the changes made to a Form 3999 after it has been completed. This report may show you how and why some street time disappeared on the day of inspection. Every edit made to a Form 3999 will not show up on this report. However, It is a starting place when verifying the street time of a letter carrier on the day of inspection. For information and advice on reading this report, see the forms description section of this book. The DOIS function analysis and data summary screens show how much and under which functions allied time is recorded. These screens are useful when investigating deducted street time because they show how much time was recorded. You will use these screens regardless of whether the adjustment is made in DOIS or CORE. Review the following on Form 1840 reverse. Add up the office and street time credit given to the territory added and or removed from the route to see if allied time was excluded when territory was transferred. You will have to compare the times transferred to the actual time it took the regular carrier to deliver the territory on the Form 3999 being used to transfer territory. For information and advice on reading PS Form 3999, see the Forms Description section of this book. Look for a manual or miscellaneous office and or street time adjustments on Form 1840 reverse. You can see these types of adjustments towards the end of Form 1840 reverse if one was made. If you see a manual or miscellaneous time adjustment like this, review management's comments on the first page of 1840 reverse, if there are any, and investigate why the time adjustments was made. Territory transfer rules. When determining what territory to transfer between routes, management must abide by the following rules found in Section 234.232 of the M39 Handbook. M39 243.232. To determine the territory to be transferred to or from any route, consider that A. Scheme changes should be kept to a minimum and simplified where possible. B. Routes should be compact, avoiding dog legs, and should not cross zip code boundaries except in unusual circumstances. C. Routes should begin and end as near as possible to the delivery unit or transportation. D. Excessive retracing or deadheading should be avoided. E. Adjustments should be made so that future growth may be absorbed by auxiliary routes. F. Variations in territory, mail volume, and methods of delivery will affect the final adjustment. Section 243.232A of the M39 Handbook, shown above, requires scheme changes to be kept to a minimum and simplified where possible. When management unilaterally optimizes with CORE, the result is usually massive territory changes that are not necessary, certainly not simple, or kept to a minimum. This point should be included in any grievance filed on improper route adjustments. Note, the higher the percentage of routes in the office that evaluate near 8 hours, yet have a major territory change, the stronger this argument becomes. 4. Rules for adjusting routes. Permanent relief is a permanent change made to the route to reduce office or street time in an effort to adjust the route as near 8 hours daily work as possible. M39 Section 243.21b. M39 243.21 Routes of more than 8 hours. B. Permanent relief may be provided by reducing carrier office or street time. Consider items such as additional segmentations, use of routers, handoffs, relocating vehicle parking, withdrawal of mail by clerks and mail handlers, providing a cart system for accountable items, etc. When routes require current adjustment and delivery point sequencing will commence within 6 months, management will adjust using non-territorial, non-scheme change adjustments. Where actual transfer of territory is necessary, see 243.23. If a handoff is the method selected for providing relief on the street, the time value associated with the delivery of the handoff must be deducted from the route getting relief and transferred to the gaining route. The only way to adjust a route evaluated less than 8 hours is to make a permanent territory addition to the route. M39 Section 243.22. M39 243.22 Route less than 8 hours. On routes where the evaluated time is less than 8 hours, make permanent additions by transferring territory through a realignment of the territory in the delivery unit. This realignment could reduce or eliminate an existing auxiliary route, reduce a regular route to auxiliary status, or eliminate it entirely. 5. Office time transfer methods. Management must determine the value of associated office time to transfer along with territory transferred between routes. Section 243.316 of the M39 provides several methods for transferring office time from route to route. M39 243.316 Office Time Column. A. Enter the number of minutes used or estimated for deliveries on segments being considered for transfer to and from the route and for new construction. Proceed entry with minus for the minutes covering transfer from the route and plus for addition to route. B. The character of the route, more or less, governs the methods of computing the office time for the territory being transferred between routes. Following are some methods which may be used. 1. If the deliveries on the route are similar in character, the following simple formula for determining the amount of office time for the deliveries transferred may be used. Divide the average office time of the inspection period appearing on Form 1840 for the route from which territory is being transferred by the total number of possible deliveries. For example, a route has 400 possible deliveries and the average office time for inspection period was 120 minutes. 120 divided by 400 equals 3 minutes per delivery. The total number of deliveries being considered for transfer should be multiplied by minutes or a fraction of minutes per delivery. 2. Another method to determine the office time percentage factor is to divide the average office time for the count week by the average total time. For example, 165 minutes office time divided by 486 minutes total time equals 34%. Therefore, the allowance of 34% of the total time value of any territory to be added or taken away from a route must be allowed for office time to prepare the mail for delivery. 3. Another method when utilizing the handheld computer is to count the mail by zip plus 4 sector segments so the number of mail pieces delivered in a segment can be calculated to determine the office time allowance for each segment to be transferred between routes. To calculate the office time allowance when transferring particular route segments, any of the following 3 methods may be used. A. Apply the current casing standards of 18 letter size, 18 other size, and 70 strap out to the actual segments. Mail count from the day of inspection. For example, a segment receives 220 pieces on day of inspection. 100 in letters divided by 18 equals 10 minutes. 40 other size pieces divided by 8 equals 5 minutes. 220 divided by 70 equals 4 minutes. The office time allowance for that segment would be 19 minutes. M39 243.316 continued. B. Follow A above, but factor in the percentage of standard office time used during the week of inspection from the carrier who serviced that segments in the most recent segment utilized. 0.80 of standard office time allowed during week of inspection. 19 times 0.80 equals 16 minutes. The office time allowance for that segment would be 16 minutes. C. Follow A above, but factor in the percentage of standard office time used during the week of inspection from the carrier whose route is gaining the segments being transferred. For example, the carrier whose route will pick up the segment utilized 0.85 of standard office time allowed during the week of inspection. 19 times 0.85 equals 17 minutes. The office time allowance for that segment will be 17 minutes. Note, the effort here is to arrive at the most accurate time allowance for the transferred segments, negating the need for corrective adjustments. 4. For new construction allowance, generally follow the procedures in 142, Extension of City Delivery Services. So y'all got all that? Y'all got all those times down? Y'all gonna know how to do that now? Isn't that some complicated stuff? But once you get it down, I mean, you'll be a master at it. Section 7. Route Adjustment Review Requirements. Section 243.6 of the M39 Handbook requires management to review the routes after an adjustment has been implemented and make further route adjustments if needed. A grievance should be filed if management either doesn't perform the review or fails to come back and make further route adjustments to bring the routes to as near 8 hours work per day as possible. This is a separate grievance from the grievance you would file at the point of the improper route adjustment. This type of case should be filed approximately 60 to 75 days after the improper route adjustment takes place. For instance, if routes are adjusted on May 1st, 2017, you should file this kind of grievance between July 1st, 2017 and July 15th, 2017. The reasons we are suggesting that you consider waiting approximately 60 to 75 days before filing this type of grievance is because that takes away the argument that a letter carrier wasn't familiar with the newly adjusted route and allows for a reasonable period of time to gather better evidence to show that the route isn't adjusted to as near 8 hours as work per day as possible. Now, I'm going to read that again. This is one of the biggest questions I get asked when people call me about 6-day counts. When should we file the grievance? Should we file it immediately? And now, the carrier that was removed, the shop steward that was removed, if y'all remember the episode where all the carriers came to the union meeting and they were arguing that this shop steward was removed maliciously, that he should be put back in because he was a hellraiser, he was grieving. And so they had a vote, and the only one that voted against him coming back was the NBA. Every carrier that came in, they flooded that union meeting, and every one of them said they wanted him back, so now he's back. The reason was because he was saying this exact same thing. The president was saying, you immediately file the grievance. Immediately file the grievance on the 6-day count. And he said, there has to be some time in between the adjustment and when I file this grievance to show that the route's not 8 hours as possible. What would we say if management tries to discipline a carrier for their performance if they just bid on a route and within 2 or 3 days they give them discipline saying, you're taking way too long on this route? What would we say? You didn't give them time to adjust to the route. You didn't give them any time to learn the route. You got to give them some considerable amount of time to get the route down pat. You have no idea if his performance is subpar. He's just got the route. The same would be their argument if we immediately grieved the 6-day count. They would say, how do they know if it's out of adjustment? They just got the adjustments. And so it would be the same argument. And so the shop steward is telling the branch president, what am I grieving? They just did the count. I don't have any data to show that the routes are out of adjustment. And so she removed him. She just removed the shop steward. Well, if you're not going to file the grievance, then I'm going to remove you. He said, I'm not filing the grievance. There's no grievance. I don't know yet. So she removed him. And so all the carriers came and said, hey, he needs to come back. The only one who sided with the establishment, the business agent, refused to side with the carriers. And that's typical in today. These ass kissers, they're going to side with the establishment. And that's the reason they're all going to get voted out. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that this week. I got into that last week. But I'm going to read this again because this is what you're going to need to know. Those stewards to say, when do I grieve? How long do I wait? I'll read this again. Section 243.6 of the M39 Handbook requires management to review the routes after an adjustment has been implemented and make further route adjustments if needed. A grievance should be filed if management either doesn't perform the review or fails to come back and make further route adjustments to bring the routes to as near 8 hours per workday as possible. This is a separate grievance from the grievance you would file at the point of the improper route adjustment. This type of case should be filed approximately 60 to 75 days after the improper route adjustment takes place. For instance, if routes are adjusted on May 1st, 2017, you should file this kind of grievance between July 2012 and July 15, 2017. The reason we are suggesting that you consider waiting approximately 60 to 75 days before filing this type of grievance is because that takes away the argument that a letter carrier wasn't familiar with the newly adjusted route and allows for a reasonable period of time to gather better evidence to show that the route isn't adjusted to as near 8 hours workday as possible. You will be arguing that management has failed to abide by Section 243.6 of the Handbook M39, which requires them to review the route adjustments to ensure that the routes are adjusted to as near 8 hours work per day as possible. In short, you are arguing that Section 243.6 of the M39 Handbook requires management to fix what they broke. The review requirements of Section 243.6 of the M39 Handbook are broken down by section on the pages that follow. 1. General requirement to review routes after adjustments. Management is required to review routes after adjustments have been implemented. M39 Section 243.611. M39 243.611. After the adjustment of routes has been placed in effect, the manager must carefully study and analyze PS Form 3997 or electronic equivalent from a nationally approved computer system that provides equivalent information. PS Form 3997B, Operations Analysis Report, PS Form 1813, Street Management Records, volume recording data, and carrier's time records to see that the objective has been met, especially for those routes where extensive changes have been made. 2. Complete new 3999s. Management must complete new 3999s after route adjustments are implemented, M39 Section 243.613. M39 243.613, when route adjustments or changes are implemented, complete a new Form 3999 to reflect the current authorized route travel pattern and schedules, etc. 3. Time record review. Management must review time records to determine if carriers are using excessive overtime or auxiliary assistance to complete assignments. This would indicate that the routes are not properly adjusted. M39 Section 243.62 and 243.63. M39 243.62 Time records. Review the carrier's time records for the periods following adjustment. The frequent use of overtime or auxiliary assistance on adjusted routes may indicate that the basis used was not sound and should be examined. 243.63 Form 3997 Unit Daily Record or PSDS Printout. Review PS Form 3997 or electronic equivalent from a nationally approved computer system that provides equivalent information to determine whether an excessive amount of auxiliary assistance is being used daily for the maintenance schedules on one or more routes. Determine if carrier technicians, T6, and carrier servicing auxiliary routes exceed the time allowed for the routes. 4. Form 3923 Review. Management is required to review Form 3923 to determine if the unit is operating efficiently. M39 Section 243.64. M39 243.64 Form 3923 Daily Delivery Operations Analysis. Review this form to determine if the unit is operating efficiently. 5. Review Form 1813 Late Leaving and Returning Report. Management must review this form to determine if carriers are frequently leaving or returning late. M39 Section 243.65. M39 243.65 Form 1813 Late Leaving and Returning Report. First Carrier Delivery Trip or PSDS Printout. Review this form to determine if carriers are frequently leaving and or returning late. Carriers who leave or return late may also be working overtime or receiving auxiliary assistance on routes. In other cases, this may indicate that starting, leaving, and returning schedules are not proper. Also, an indication of possible improper scheduling and or adjustment would be consistent early leaving by carriers. 6. Street Management Record Review. Management must review street management records to determine if carriers are using proper work methods, following lines of travel, etc. M39 Section 243.66. M39 243.66 Street Management Records. Review street management records to determine if carriers are using proper methods on the street, following prescribed lines of travel, taking shortcuts, fingering mail, etc. 7. Volume Record Review. Management must use Form 3921 to analyze volume data to determine if an unusual increase or decrease in volume has occurred. M39 Section 243.67. M39 243.67 Volume Record Data. Review Form 3921 to determine whether there has been an unusual increase or decrease in volume which would affect the carrier's performance. 8. Further route adjustment requirements. If the routes are found to be out of adjustment after the review, Section 243.682 of the M39 Handbook requires management to readjust the routes. M39 243.682. If the route is found to be too heavy, release should be granted, and conversely, if found to be light, work should be added. If the carrier frequently uses overtime or receives auxiliary assistance, determine if the route is in adjustment or if the carrier is not serving it efficiently. A special inspection may be in order. 9. Retain Forms 1840 in the unit. One copy of Form 1840 for each route must be retained in the delivery unit. M39 Section 243.7. M39 243.7, disposition of forms 1840. Original of forms 1840 should be sent to the office of the manager in charge of delivery service, and one copy retained in the delivery unit. And so there's all I'm gonna read because it's getting late. It's gonna be 1 o'clock before I get to bed. And so I'm gonna start with section 8, forms descriptions, in 2 weeks. Next week I'm gonna go over the saving minutes. That's what I always train on. And I think you'll like that. There's some very good stuff, and I'll send all that to Mallory, and she can put that up on From A to Arbitration, because you want to print that and keep it, all right? And so there's you some, well, how much is that? It's 40 minutes of reading, but it's getting late here. It's already an hour and 36 minutes because I talked too much initially about saying goodbye. But I wouldn't suggest all you advocates be the shit talker that I was. That was just me. I like putting pressure on labor. I told you that I would call, JB and I would be working on testimony, and I would call labor and I'd say, hey, you got a pen and paper? Yeah. Here's the questions I'm going to ask your witnesses under cross. And I would give them the questions because there's nothing they could do about it. And I would ask them. I know they're probably like, he's not asking it. And I'd ask them because there's nothing they can do about what's coming. Kind of like this establishment. There's nothing they can do about what's coming. Kind of like the Postal Service. There's nothing they can do about what's coming. But that's how I was an advocate. I just tell them what I'm going to ask in the cross. Just so to keep them up late. And they'd have to call their witnesses and say, hey, and then they would be a wreck. And they'd always tell you the next morning, I couldn't get any sleep, Corey, thanks. But, that's just part of the game. But anyway, y'all have a fantastic rest of the week. Next Sunday, I'm going to come back on. We're going to do saving minutes, all right? Some more shout-outs, and if something else happens. There's new charges being brought forward from Branch 70. Some fantastic charges. If you read them, man, they're very well versed. I may read those next Sunday, okay? Very good charges. And we'll see what the Executive Council has, because they're they're to the point. It's yes or no. And, it's obvious that what they cited was violated. And so I'd like to see how the Executive Council is going to get out of this. I think they should do a public vote. They shouldn't do a private vote. It allows too much cowardice to go on. Of course, 90% of them are cowards. So, you can pretty much figure out who voted, how. So, anyway, there's you some 6-day count stuff. We're in it heavy. Me saying goodbye to something I love so much, arbitration, advocacy. It was one of the highlights of my career. In my 32 years, is one of my highlights. Going in that setting all over the South, some other places, and flat getting it on, man. Loved it. Love that stuff. We did well. So look forward to training those when I'm EVP, having a more involvement with that, right? So get that site, like I said, and use it in y'all's training. I've explained it to you, and it'll be a good one. Sometimes your witnesses just ain't going to cooperate, and you have to go it alone. And so I thought we had a good enough case to win. I think if you read the decision, you could see the arbitrator was wanting to give it to us, just couldn't do it. And that happens, right? So I love y'all, city letter carriers, with all my heart. I love you very much. And it was a joy of mine to represent my people here in this region in arbitration. As Formal A, it's been a joy to do that. And, I've been called on to bigger and better things. And so, but until I retire, I'm going to put you first, and I'm going to love you with all my heart. And that's a promise from me to you. I'm going to love you. And that's going to drive me to do everything humanly possible to protect you. And that's what I'll do. And better days are coming, man. Good days are coming to the NELC, to the city letter carriers. The sun will be shining again. We'll be proud. Putting on that uniform and coming in knowing that we've got representation finally. The NLC will get an overhaul. We'll get a facelift, right? It's dreary. It's filled with undesirables right now that have gotten fat and lazy and are stealing our money. And so we'll take care of all that. All that'll be taken care of, okay? I love you, city letter carriers. I really do. And I'll talk to y'all next Sunday. Y'all have a fantastic week, all right?